Okay, I wish the circumstances were different, but it's brilliant to see you all and so many people I haven't seen for so long. My name's Moz. I'm privileged enough to be the pastor here. Neil is going to lead the meeting, but I get the job of doing my notices at the start, as any good pastor does. If you're not familiar with the building, I have to tell you that emergency exits are through the car park, through this door here, out there, and through the main entrance you came in.
That would be nice.
We are live streaming this morning. If you prefer not to be on camera, you can see what's on the camera there. But if you prefer not to be on camera at all, then feel free to sit towards the back. And if you're sharing anything, if you could just be aware of where you're stood and make sure you're using the microphone so anyone at home can pick that up. Afterwards, there'll be cake and coffee served. So coffee will be served from the hatch at the back there, and then cake will be on the corridor down there. So if we were to maybe make some sort of one-way system, so we go out this door and down just to prevent some congestion around there at the end. We're not going to have a time of prayer as part of our meeting or part of our celebration of life this morning, but if anybody would like prayer for anything at all, then myself and the leadership team are available afterwards and would be more than happy to do that for you. Brilliant. I think that was everything I had to say. So at George's request, Neil, George's son, is going to lead our time together this morning. So I shall pass over to Neil.
Don't go by looks. It's not him. Do you want that back?
Yeah, I shall have. That's just for you to speak on.
Okay, is it on? Am I going to get reverb, as we say in the trade? I've got the glasses on. Dad would have been absolutely gobsmacked. He said to me, nearing the end, when he finally realised his mortality and that he wasn't going to be sticking around, he said to me, he says, Neil, he says, I'd like you to do me a favour. This is my daughter, Hannah, looking after her old dad. Bless her. Thank you, darling. But look at that. Steady as out, innit? Flipping heck. So I'd like to welcome you all. Thank you so much. I looked round and I was getting emotional, and we haven't even started. At the people that are here, the local people that are looking after us, the local people that have left their homes to come and see us on a drizzly day. There's some people that have travelled a very long way to come and see us. I thank you as well. We've got the live streaming, so I'd like to welcome everybody who's watching at home. Thank you for taking time to tune in and watch this celebration of Dad. Welcome to the Thanksgiving and celebration of our dad, George Jarvis. Now, you'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to ramble on for hours. I'm not allowed to preach. I'm not allowed to do anything hyper-religious or out like that on Dad's instruction. So I'm going to say a short bit. We're going to have some people who are going to bring some memories of Dad. We've got some people here that I'm going to call on. And then we are going to intersperse that with a couple of songs that we're going to sing. One is a hymn and one is a chorus. Those of you who know Dad, and I've noticed that you've all come out in your best bib and tucker, Sunday best and all the rest of it. And Dad was quite well known, I don't know if anybody was aware, that he loved his matching shirt and socks. So he was a big one on that. People that know me know that I have 247 pairs of black socks and one pair of brown socks to go with some tan shoes I've got. That's it. But today I've got the pink shirt on. So I've done that. And Debbie, my wife, very kindly, brace yourself for this. Whoa, look at that. Bright pink. I've never wore a pair of bright pink socks in my life. And needless to say, I never will again. But that's in honour of my dad. When Dad realised he was nearing the end of his life, he talked openly about his end. On a number of occasions, we discussed his passing, and he asked me if I would oversee and conduct his funeral. I suggested to him that we would have a private service for the family at the crematorium. We got through that, and I did that for them. And we would be having a celebration time at All Nations Church. And Dad says, I'd like you to oversee it. There'll be a couple of people that may like to share some memories, and there might be one or two people there that we know. One or two people. In fact, I was scared before we started, and seeing you lot sat there, and whoever's there watching over the internet has made me even more nervous. So please bear with me. So he says that they may want to share, so just oversee it. And right the way through, from when Dad was diagnosed, he had prostate cancer, right the way through to the Saturday before he passed, he was very open about a lot of things. At one point he even said to me, he says, I've come to terms with my morality, Neil. He says, and I want to discuss that with you because I'm not going to be sticking around for very long. I went, okay. So he says, and I want you and Marie to know that if there's anything in the house that you want, let me know and we'll sort it out for you. So thanks, Dad. Thought this is a bit premature, but that's just like you. So we were very open about the whole thing. Very open. The family, Mum and Dad particularly, were very open about talking about cancer, which is what Dad had. And funnily enough, you'd think that's a very sensitive thing to talk about, particularly a man who's dying of it. But the way Mum and Dad are, and the way Dad is and was an open man. He was an open book, and he was very honest and very matter-of-fact, typical Yorkshireman. So he made the whole process, although it was sad, a lot easier than what it could have been, and I thank him for that, and I thank Mum for that as well. A brief timeline of Dad's life. Dad was born into a humble family in Featherstone. His dad was a miner and his mum a housewife. Because his mum and dad couldn't afford to send him to university, Dad got himself an apprenticeship at the Yorkshire Copperworks in Leeds. Dad first met Mum at a youth bonfire party. Now, Mum, you was a Christian at 17, and you went to Cutsight Gospel Hall in Castleford. Some of you may know it from around here, I don't know. And Dad went to Featherstone Gospel Hall, although he wasn't a Christian. Now, I found out the other night, he's a crafty little so-and-so, because he went to this Gospel Hall not having given his life to Christ. I think he enjoyed the time of fellowship with them and the activities they did. So he hopped on free of charge, as it were. But even from them early days, he was a people man. He wanted to mix with them, and he enjoyed people's company. One day, Dad asked Mum out, but she said no, because you're not a Christian. Unknown to Mum, Dad had given his life to Christ 6 days earlier. He was 19. It was then that he started to pursue her. Or Mum's word is, he started to woo me. We don't use that word nowadays, do we? We're going out. Started to woo her, which obviously was successful, because Mum and Dad got married on the 3rd of March 1962 and lived at Snydale, Wakefield. I bet those of you in Huddersfield know where Snydale is. Do you? No? Oh, you know it, Pete. Okay. Snydale, never heard of it. Anyway, in order to progress his career, Dad started a science degree at the age of 23. Oh no, no. You know something? I said this morning, I said, I may say something wrong or get it out of context. It doesn't matter, Neil. But anyway, where did I go wrong there?
That's when he got his degree at 23. He didn't start on it at 23.
When did he start on it?
Well, when he got his apprenticeship at Yorkshire Copperworks, so that would be about 17.
17. So from 17 to, and then at 23 he got his degree. I apologise. It shows the frailty of my disposition. So he started at about 17. He completed this part-time, 2 days and 1 night a week, and successfully obtained his Bachelor of Science with honours. The next big event in their life was the birth of their son, who was born 26th of February 1964. Now you know the date. I'm happy to give my address if you want to send birthday cards in future. In May 1965, Mum and Dad moved to Leicester, and Dad took a job at English Electric in Wexton and was promoted to section leader. Now, as it happens, my brother-in-law, or my wife's brother-in-law, and good friend, Andy, who's just sat here, just give us a wave, Andy, there we go, was one of Dad's, probably the only surviving one, initial employee that Dad employed. You was way back then, weren't you? So we've got a little bit of history there and a bit of a memory. Thanks for coming, by the way. I digress. Okay, so church-wise, so he joined English Electric. Church-wise, they went to York Street Gospel Hall. Now, I think that's in Leicester, just up London Road. Don't know if it's still there, but that's where they went. And in time, they started a group who met at Marriott Road School, and Dad became an elder in the Brethren. Another significant event in their lives then came along in the form of a baby girl. And my sister was born on the 11th of March 1973. Is that right, Marie? Got that bit right. Phew. We joined Leicester Christian Fellowship, and 3 years and 1 month he was asked to go full time. Dad went to his boss at English Electric to tell him he was leaving. They asked why he wanted to leave, and Dad told them it was to become full time for the church. They offered Dad 3 days working for them and 2 days working for the church, in case it didn't work. But Dad said no. So they suggested he work 2 days for them and 3 days for the church, in case it didn't work. And it would be a way of keeping his hand in. Dad had faith, and he knew it were going to work. So he refused their offer and left. While Mum and Dad were at Leicester Christian Fellowship, the church grew, and Leicester Christian Fellowship North and South was born, and some of you here remember those times. The North led by Ron Eagle and Fred Marlowe, and the South was led by our dad. In time, Mum and Dad moved up to Matlock to lead the church there. And after some time, Bryn Jones asked if they would move to lead another church. But Mum in particular said no. She felt Matlock had a few leaders in recent times and the church needed some stability. That was very wise. That's my mum. While at Matlock, Dad planted a church in Chesterfield, and Dave Bunting headed that up when he finished Bible college, and Dad supported him. After time, Bryn came back to Dad and asked him to move churches, and it was decided on Keighley. And Dad loved his time there with the people, or here should I say, with the people and the work they did. I could tell this because whenever we came to visit, he spoke very fondly. And I've spoke to one or two people, and I've had to say to them, what's your name? What's your surname? Because Dad would always talk about people. And I'm meeting them now, and I don't know who you are. Until you tell me your name and go, I remember Dad talking about you. And he had a good time here, I can assure you. He was blessed. While at Keighley, Dad was asked to visit India on the invitation of Ian Russell. Dad went with him and felt at home, and his heart was captured by the people there, leading him to return several times. Dad supported the leaders there and taught the Bible school and became very close to Ralph. Then Ralph moved to Germany and Dad started to support him there. During the time that Dad was in leadership, his serving heart always came through, cutting grass and decorating people's homes. A couple in the church got married, but for whatever reason, and I don't know, Mum and Dad weren't invited to the wedding. But the catering organiser of the church was asking for helpers, and Dad offered to do the washing up. While the guests were enjoying the wedding, Dad enjoyed serving behind the scenes, washing up and fellowshipping with the helpers. To some people, Dad was a pastor, a teacher, a leader, a friend, encourager and shepherd. But one thing he definitely was, and that was a servant. Throughout his ministry, he never asked anyone to do anything he wouldn't do himself. We are so proud and privileged to have had such a wonderful dad. We're going to sing a song. So I'd like to introduce you to Pete Crabtree. I'll embarrass him. We've dragged Pete out of retirement. I remember when I used to lead worship in Chesterfield and Pete was the pianist nearly every time. So we go back a little bit and I've asked him, and bless him, he said yes, and he's going to help us with this. So thank you for that. You'll see that we're going to sing Dad's favourite hymn. Dad's favourite hymn was Up From the Grave He Arose, which I said to him at the time, and we're talking about getting on a bit now in his life, and I said to him, I says, that's a bit of a strange one to have at a funeral, Dad, isn't it? Up from the grave he arose. And he smiled at me, went, yes, I suppose it is. I says, well, make sure we keep the coffin lid well and truly screwed on. Bless him. So what we're going to sing is, Up From the Grave He Arose. You've got the words there. There are actually 3 verses. We're only going to sing the 2. And we're going to see how we go with this. So if you want to stand up, you can. If you want to sing where you are, then by all means. Okay, Pete. Okay. Low in the grave he lay, Jesus my Saviour, waiting the coming day, Jesus my Lord. Here we go. Up from the grave he arose, with a mighty triumph for his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Death cannot keep its prey, Jesus my Saviour, he tore the bars away, Jesus my Lord. Up from the grave he arose, with a mighty triumph for his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Thank you. Bless you. Now we're going to have a time of sharing. We've got, if I can work this technology, we've got some videos. So we've got 4 of them. I don't know what order they're going to come in. One from India, one from Zimbabwe, and I think we may have those who know them, Gara and Sandra Dufty as well. Okay. There they are. Okay, Moz.
It is our privilege to join you from South Africa those that have come to support George and the family and to say farewell.
Today we join with you to celebrate George Jarvis. We were so blessed to have spent many years working with George, and we are so very grateful for the impact he's had in our lives.
George served tirelessly, giving of himself for the benefit of others. He worked for Help International for many years, pouring and supporting lives across the nations. George specifically poured his life into India and has left his love of life in that place and the love that he had for the Lord with the people there.
The family known as Together was all the richer for George's life amongst us. We will personally miss his wisdom, his love, his interest, his care, his wise counsel to the family of Together.
I have precious memories of travelling with George and just in conversation with George. He was clearly a man who was direct, he was clear, but he had a deep, deep love of the corporate body of Christ. He will be greatly missed by many. I will especially miss the colour of his coordinated shirt and socks. That was always something we would laugh with him about. One of the things I remember fondly when I took him to India for the first time, he diligently sought out different colour socks to match his shirts. He had fun inside him, but clear in his passion towards Christ. He will be greatly missed in every way. So beloved as a friend, so beloved friend, we thank you for the colour you added to our lives. We will all meet again. Much love to the family gathered together.
Our prayers are with you, Pat, Neil, Marie and the grandchildren as you remember George and celebrate his life today. Our prayers are with you.
We join together and say, we celebrate
George,
a wonderful man and a magnificent life. And George Jarvis will always have a place in our hearts. Pat, you will also have a place of prayer in our hearts.
Yes. Bless you all.
Amen.
Very good.
This is Ralf Glöckner speaking. I'm speaking from Germany. Together with my wife, Renuka, we have experienced George in a loving way when he came to India first time 2004, and from then onwards every year. What a loving relationship developed with us and with the whole work, our mission work, Rays of Joy in India, in Agra, in Shahrastan. We had at the time, we had a Bible school, and he would teach in the Bible school, he would teach in our church, and really developed a relationship with every one of our ministers. He was able to visit a number of places in India, and he loved your food.
Yeah.
He loved to be in our house, and we spent hours together. It was a genuine interest in our lives, and in fact in the lives of everybody that he met, and he wouldn't forget anybody. And we really realized over the years what developed was, that he was like a father to us, and we felt like being son and daughter to him. And that made his coming to India more and more meaningful. And later, as we shifted to Germany, and we continued this relationship, whenever we would go to England, he loved it that we would relate to everybody that was important for him. For example, most important, of course, the church and all the members. And many of them really wanted to spend time, come out to India, invest themselves not only financially but by coming and doing something. Some of the youth came several times, and some of the couples, and old and young, and it was very interesting. It was all because of George, the way he lived it and wanted it. Yes, and we really treasure him. We treasure the way he shared the word, and we could ask him every question, and there was a way of wisdom. He was a jolly fellow as well, and yet full of the wisdom of God, and we loved it. So we thank the Lord for this time that we were able to spend with him, and we celebrate his life and these memories come.
Dear brothers, I am so sorry to hear that Pastor Jarvis has passed away. My condolence is to the family and to the church. The aid of church that was laid by him, and himself, the work he was doing. It was so tremendous, that was good to us. I thank God myself, and sad to hear that the man of God has gone. But it's something good again that I must appreciate, because blessed are those who die now in Jesus.
Is that it? Shame about the last video. I was struggling to hear what he was saying. Am I plugged in?
Would you mind just placing your button there as well?
Oh yeah.
Point it this way.
Just out of interest, spooky that Gary. Anybody actually have a shirt and matching socks on today? Really? Let me have a look.
Anybody who knows me well would find that not too difficult. If anybody knows me well, they know black and black is probably my colour.
Oh, we've got some spotty bits on.
Yes, but I thought, well, George was a colourful chap as well. So
He was.
Pay honour to the many colours.
Are you Mark?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Come forward, because I'd like you to share in a second. My daughter, Dave. I'm trying to remember these names.
Did you say come now? Sorry.
Yeah, just hang on there for me. Red tie.
This is difficult.
Red socks. Red and white socks, thank you very much. In honour of Dad. My daughter, Hannah, has got a pink top on, pink socks. My niece, Holly, has got turquoise and turquoise socks. You've got matching as well. Spot on, thank you very much. That would have tickled Dad, the fact that you've done that. So we're going to have some people. I'm glad you stood up, because that's dovetailed nice, didn't it? Is this going to just go on, whatever? There you go, my friend.
Right.
Mark Turner, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. If I was doing a sketch, I'd find this easiest. Sorry?
Press the button, it's turned itself off.
If I was doing a sketch or performing in a band, I'd find this a lot easier. Was anybody here at mine and Michelle's wedding? Right. I don't. Oh, is it not working? All right. George came to mine and Michelle's wedding. Actually, I actually remember where he was sat. He was sat just inside the door at the back of the left. But nobody knows this story apart from Michelle, myself, and my two ushers. George had a way of making his presence felt wherever he was, invariably to the good. But my ushers had never met George before. They were not from church. And they were a little concerned. He sang very loudly to the hymns. And to the prayers, his amens were very enthusiastic. And I've been told I need to say this in a Yorkshire way. His hallelujahs were very, very, very loud. And they didn't know what to make of him. They thought he was a disturbing presence. And they had wondered at some point whether to ask him to leave. And when they actually told myself and Michelle after the ceremony, the looks of horror on our faces told them that not asking him to leave had been the right decision. Because when we told him he was the pastor of our church, they looked visibly shaken. Like I said, George didn't even know that story. We thought it best not to tell him, as we hadn't known him that long, and we didn't know him very well. But George, like I said, had a way of making his presence felt. And he did in our lives. In fact, I don't think I would keep it together at this. But, well, it probably shouldn't be me up here. As you know, Michelle worked for George for many years. And she would be the one probably up here saying this, not me. Sorry.
Don't worry.
Like I said, she worked for George for many years. And they became good friends. And that's what George would do. Their friendship was really good. And he became a friend to our family. And you saw that in the good times of life and in the dark times. And when Michelle became ill, George was just this rock. And after she died, he was just this rock. And when I had my own brush with cancer, who was there? Who picked me up from the hospital in Sheffield? George. And in the aftercare, who did a lot of the running around? George. And that's the kind of man he was. He was funny. I enjoyed our trips. He enjoyed our trips. And I was really pleased that his last trip to Leeds, to St. James's, I got to take him and pick him up. Because it seemed like a nice, I say nice, the English language didn't, it seemed like a good way of not paying him back, but it was a good, a little bit of time to spend with him. Obviously, we didn't know at that point how bad things were, but I was very happy to take him and spend a bit of time with him because I hadn't seen him for a while, obviously. But yes, George had a way of making his presence felt, and I think we all felt him. He wasn't just in our family. I know Rebecca was very sad when she heard how poorly he was. She got very upset. But yes, like I said, he had him in everybody's lives who knew him. And to us, he was a good friend, our family.
Very good.
Like I said, thank you. And thank him.
Thanks for sharing that, Mark. Bless you. Not easy. Martin Rowe. This is a blast from the past for us. Martin and Jill Rowe.
I can tell it's from the past from how old I am. Back from Matlock days, Neil, you mentioned Matlock, and George and Pat moved to Matlock, and that's where really I would say that George became a father in the faith. George and Pat, just very down to earth, but very full of faith as well. Just to say, Pat, the reason I asked Jill to marry that weekend was because you asked me in home group, when are you going to ask her to marry you then? And I said, well, soon, we'd better get a move on then. And that was George and Pat down to the... so that weekend, I did ask Jill to marry me, and we've been going strong ever since. But in Matlock, it's been mentioned what a servant George is. I lived in a town 10 miles away, and George would travel over to Alfreton, pick me up, bring me across for home group, take me back, and then travel back. So, he was doing 40 miles just to take us to home group, which was fantastic. A lovely time. I don't know if Marie remembers, but we used to play badminton with George and Marie, Jill and myself. It was like me and Marie against George and Jill, just to make it almost even. I think we won most of the time, Marie, didn't we? Yeah. But it just showed us that a leader was not aloof. A leader was part of the people. We all have faith in Jesus, but he showed me very much that was the case, that leaders don't need to be aloof. They don't need to be above somebody. You can be amongst people and still lead. And I think that was very important. Those times in the car, he would say to me, "Martin, are you called?" And I'd say, "Yes, George." "To what?" "I don't know, George." I desperately wanted to give him an answer, and I couldn't, but the number of times he asked me that question. And he was a man of vision. Neil's mentioned that planted the church in Chesterfield. There was a month in Matlock when he was preaching. It was called Body Month. I don't know if you remember it, Pat, but it was called Body Month. And it wasn't to do with our physical bodies. It was to do with the body of Christ. Now, we lived in Alfreton, so Jill and myself at the time said, "Well, do you want us to move into Matlock? We'll happily move into Matlock to be closer to the body." And he said, "Hold on a minute." He says, "I used to live in Leicester, as was mentioned. It could take me half an hour or so to get across the city." He says, "Is the travelling across a problem to you?" And we said, "No." He says, "Stay out here. Who knows what God will do, and even beyond." And subsequently, Chesterfield was planted, and then Alfreton was planted as well, and is still going strong. But that's George, a man of vision, not wanting everything in and just around himself, but willing to release out and plant out. And I thank him for that vision. When we heard that you were moving up to Keighley, I can tell you now, I went home and I cried for 3/4 of an hour. I had never cried so long in my life. If you'd have said, "Come up to Keighley with us," we would have. But it's amazing what God and what George had foreseen in God, I think. And I had a moment where the Holy Spirit just said, "Right, stop crying, get to know Dave Bunting, who's still the leader in Chesterfield now. They're going to need all the support they can get." But this was the seed of George, I think, the seed of George and Pat. I can't mention George without mentioning Pat, really, because you won, And we do thank you for everything that you've put into our life. Foundation of faith, I would say, both of you. Very much the teaching, the good old Elisha program. Started off with "Consider the ant, you sluggard," which is not a bad little study, is it, eh? And but those things remain in our lives. Things that you've put in were very, very foundational, and the fact that we still stand. And I don't just mean stand in here, but stand in faith because of the things that were put underneath us, put into us from a very, very early time. So, George, Pat, thank you very, very much. And Marie, thanks for the badminton. I still remember it well. There we go.
Thank you very much, Martin. Cheers. Eileen, do you want to come and share?
Okay.
I've watched a few preaches of Eileen on YouTube when she preaches here. So it's not a preach today, though, is it?
No,
Eileen,
it isn't.
are you okay?
Yeah, I'm up.
There you go.
Hi. I would like to I could speak a great deal, but I'd like to focus on the time that I moved over here, probably 1994, I think, and came to live in Riddlesden because a year earlier I'd got a job here at the local school. And I was the head teacher there for over 20 years in Riddlesden. And It's funny that Neil should mention about washing up, because one of the first things that really struck me was that I'd never seen a church leader do practical things before. And one of my first memories is watching him wash up. You know, and I thought, my God, this is a bit different from where I've come from. I won't say where, Bradford. Oops, what a giveaway. No, you know, I'd never seen that before. And I was so impressed. And I had been a deputy head a short time before I got the headship in the school. And I really feel that for me, George was such a good example of how to be a leader and a teacher. And gave me a kind of a model, really, as to how to be with people, because he was a man of the people, and he would be seen. And I'm quite proud of the fact that people used to come into the school and think I was the caretaker. You know, you know, but Pat and George were really good. They let us have our very first Ofsted in their garage, would you believe? Because we didn't have room to fit them in, you know, when Ofsteds weren't such a thing. And Pat came and helped the children cross the road. So a really good part of our lives. And then later on, Holly came, which was such a blessing. She still is, I'm sure. For me, he was such a good example of how to be with people. It was self-effacing, he was a humble man, and he was funny, and he was a great teacher. And one thing that I wanted to say about him, great teachers are great learners. And I don't believe that George ever stopped learning. I mean, he started reading a book called the Mirror Bible, and I thought, oh, what's that then? You know, and this is only in recent years, and I thought, I'm going to have a look at that. Well, I was hooked then, you know, but it was him that had started sort of reading it, and I've got masses out of that. I've got masses out of his teaching. I remember him speaking on 1 Timothy. It was the best exposition I'd ever heard up to that point of one of the letters. I mean, if not afterwards even. It was just so good. It was such an excellent teacher and preacher, as well as being a very kind, self-effacing, thoughtful person. He was a good example of that he didn't think of himself first, he thought of others. And I think a lot of the verses right at the end of all the letters in the New Testament are all about caring for people and being self-effacing and putting other people first. Well, he was the epitome of that. And I know that when people go, people quite often, you know, they just pick all the good bits. But I couldn't think of a bad bit of George, to be honest. I could only think of all those things. I thought there's somewhere in one of the Gospels it says, you are living letters written in a big hand. And he was a living letter from God to people.
supported him better. And next to the bed was a chest of drawers with a load of cards on. And Hannah was sat at one end of the bed and I was sat at the side reading these cards. And he'd lost all of his strength at that point to be able to even talk. But he looked over at me and he went, Neil, he says, what are all these cards that keep coming? So I says, well, they're cards from people that know you, Dad. These are cards that have got sentiments in them and comments in them about what you've done through your ministry in their life and how you've affected them and how you've been a blessing to them. And they just want to say how much they love you and pass on their regards to you. Smile came on his face, went, oh, no, that wasn't me. God did all that. And he took no glory for himself. And I tried to encourage him, no, it was you that did it. He wouldn't have it. Then batteries going gave me an opportunity to share that. Thanks, Moz. Everything works together and all that. Very good. I've got Karen Robinson. Is Karen in the room? Come on, Karen. Have some sharing. You're going to come round this way. Okay?
Yeah.
Good. Are we on? Okay.
I wanted to share just a memory. When I came to this church in 2010, 11, and very shortly afterwards, I had a psychotic episode. And I remember George coming to see me in hospital, and it didn't half give me a boost. And I remember when I was in the throes of this psychotic episode, I woke up and I thought, I need some prayer. So I came to the church without an appointment, and George was in his office, and he just took some time to talk to me and pray for me. And that really meant a great deal during that time when I was really poorly. And that's my little...
Bless you. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you very much. Wayne and Lillian, I've seen them both this morning working like Trojans, bless them. Wrestling tables out the cupboard and carrying stuff. And I looked over and I said to them, I said, do you need a hand with that? Oh, no, we're fine. Thought, all right, then I'll leave you to it. Are you coming round this way? Is Wayne keeping out the back?
He's out somewhere. I hope.
There you go then.
Wayne, if you're upstairs, pop down 2-6. Yeah. We just love George so much. He was a great friend to us. We knew he was a Yorkshireman because he came with a flat cap, and it was just down to earth and everything. Here he is.
Come on, mate.
And he just spoke the truth and everything. And it was so great to see Clopas on there. For those of you who don't know, I think most of you will, Clopas' wife Willett live in Zimbabwe. And it was because of reading the magazine, and then we thought about it and talked with George, and he just encouraged us to go out there. And this year, we're making our 8th journey to Zimbabwe. And it's all because of what George had done. Clopas is about 94, so it's absolutely amazing. And he just encouraged us. His teaching's been great. And one of the great things that we remember is the barbecues. We'd have breakfasts at the church 3-4 times a year, and we'd have barbecues. And who would be doing the barbecue? Your dad. It was there. It was just serving and everything. And it just, we're motivated with it all, weren't we, Wayne? It was just so great. Thanks, George.
Good. Do you want to say anything, Wayne? You're okay. Thank you very much, Lillian. Wind that wire. Wayne and Lillian, thank you. And I think we've got Helen. Is Helen with us? I'm going to thank Helen later, but Helen has done a fantastic job. We've got cake and drinks afterwards, and she's been doing that. So there you go.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. George, I'm sorry it's written down. George is a man who walked with God, as does his family. I remember him preaching some few years ago when I first joined this church in about 2019. His preaching, I remember him preaching some few years ago. I was deeply affected, so wrote him a letter which I gave him the following week. This was the first of many times that I was either influenced or found myself feeling relief that someone believed in some of the things that I did. Last Easter, I gave him a book by George MacDonald. There then followed a series of conversations via text. I have found myself to be a better, more Christian person because of his wisdom, his love of God, which was expressed in his love of people. I will be forever indebted to his influence in my life. But what I also believe is that now that he is with God, I can still communicate with him, knowing that when I meditate upon his words, talk with his family, think about his wisdom and love, I remain in a relationship with him through prayer. He's still with us in spirit. And all I want to say is blessings upon George's family and all of us.
Thank you.
In his name.
Bless you. Thank you very much. And I believe lastly we've got Moz, leader of All Nations Church, who's hosted this. Have you got a microphone that works, Moz, there?
I'll steal this one, thank you. Before, because I'll forget if I don't say this now, if you hadn't noticed, there is a book in the entrance. If you'd like to, if you've got any memories of your own that you'd like to share, if you feel free to fill that in, and then we'll pass it on to Pat and the family afterwards. So I joined what was Airedale Church when I was 17, and I just remember seeing how humble and welcoming and wise and funny that George was, and I just knew instantly that this was a community that was going to become my home. And I don't know if anyone remembers a giant sheep that we once had in the church. From memory, it was painted green and yellow. And I have no idea why we had a giant sheep, but I remember pushing this sheep, and I think Alan Wright may have helped us push it. I don't know if Alan remembers, but pushing this giant sheep through the town centre and back to this building, and just the hilarity and we can imagine some of the jokes that were coming out from all sides. Just a brilliant memory of him. If you fast forward 17 years, and when it was suggested that I was to become the pastor here, one of the first people that I went to for advice was George. And to know that his experience, wisdom, and his warmth and his friendship was just so invaluable in taking on a role that he had just done so well for over 20 years. If I had an issue, just to know that he was on the other end of the phone and that he was backing me in prayer was just so comforting and so supporting. I think my most profound memories of George will come from the last 6 months of his life, when I was privileged to meet with him many times over his last few months. And the way that he approached the end of this, I'll say this stage of his existence, the way that he approached that was just made me admire him more, because he didn't fear death one bit. He was absolutely certain of where he was going and where he is now. The faith that defined him was so secure right to the end, and also secure to the end was his humility. I remember him calling me. I was in a classroom in school after a lovely Year 9 lesson, and I get a phone call, and he goes, "Right, Moz, I've been told I've got a couple of weeks left. I want to talk about my funeral, please." And I was like, okay, just let me sit down. And when we were talking about the arrangements for today, he said, well, I know I'll need to work around the other users of the building, the other people who are in here. And I was like, no, George, you won't. When you need it, this building will be available for you. You're far more important. And his response was, well, I won't be more important when I'm in a box, will I? And we then agreed, though, that whilst his body might be in a box, he would not be. Eileen said how fond George was of the Mirror translation. So I just want to read from 2 Corinthians chapter 5. It says, our skin suits have a sell-by date. Our spirit bodies are eternal. The same God who fashioned these skin bodies in our mother's womb engineered our spirit bodies to be our permanent dwelling. I thank God for George, for the immeasurable blessings he has given to me personally, to so many of us in this room, and the church as a whole. And I just ask that God will help us all to learn from George's example. As a church community, we seek to continue his work. Thank you.
Very good, Maz. Thank you very much. Turn it off, yeah. Well, 13:58. Dad says it doesn't need to go on longer than an hour. Don't go on. I think I've done all right there. We might be able to squeeze in Pete if you're ready for a tinkle on the old ivories. We're going to sing a chorus. Who remembers, therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return? Enough of us to belt this one out. And then I'll do a few thank yous and then we shall finish. For the redeemed of the Lord shall return, and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their head. Therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return, and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and mourning shall flee away. Therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return, and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon. Let's sing that again. Therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return, and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their head. Therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return, and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their head. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and mourning shall flee away. Therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return, and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their head. Brilliant. Thank you. As they say, end on a high note and keep them wanting. So just a few thank yous. I'd like to thank Moz and All Nations Church for hosting our time together. Thanks to Pete for coming over, for coming out of retirement and playing the piano for us. Thank you, Pete. And Helen, who came up and shared, thank you for the catering. They looked after us after the crematorium and this gathering with sandwiches, and that was great. That was a surprise. I didn't expect that. So thank you for that. We thank everybody watching online. and celebrating the life of our dad and husband, brother-in-law, and church leader and friend, encourager, servant, as we've heard. So I just want to invite everybody. A big thing that Mum and Dad had, and it's come across as a theme all the way through, was the love that Mum and Dad, that Dad had for the church, the people of the church. He loved to fellowship with people of the church. So we'd like to invite you to stop back. We've got cakes, we've got loads of cakes by the looks of it. And you can have a nice Yorkshire brew with us as well. I'd encourage you to stay, an extension of what we've already done. Some of you haven't seen each other, I'm sure, looking round here, for a number of years, and there's some catching up to be done. So thank you all for coming. We really do appreciate it. Thank you on behalf of Mum and Marie. Thank you so much. And God bless you all, and enjoy this time of fellowship.